Hi, my name is Matthew Fairfax, and I'm the co-founder of the Justice and Soul Foundation. Well, actually, I really appreciate you guys being here, and especially because some of you probably have no idea who I am or what I'm doing. So it's a leap of faith for you to be here. I do see the wine and nosh, so that usually does attract people, so I'm glad. I want to tell you a couple things about myself. I am a salon owner. I own James Allen Salon and Spa up in Shoreline. And I've been in the salon industry vicariously for a while. I got introduced to the salon industry in probably about '87 through my partner at the time. And then in '99, we had the opportunity to buy the salon. And at that point, my whole background was outside the salon, and it was in corporate America. So I'd done work in corporate America, and we had this opportunity to buy the salon and do something different. Because I wanted to take my background in the human resources area and say, how do we apply this to a team? How do we make the team differently? One of the things that I learned early on in my career was one of the ways, I was mentored by one of my bosses that said, if you want to have a successful business, make sure that you look at the responsibility that you have to the community that supports you. And that really resonated with me, because one of the things I thought is that, yes, the community is the most important thing, and I've been raised to give back to the community. So that became our focus as a salon. How do we get involved? Sponsor the Little League, buy a table at the Shoreline Public Schools Foundation. So everything that we could, we were there. We would either donate, volunteer, put together a basket, something like that. And about 2008, somebody came to us, and one of our clients, and said, you guys are big in the community, you give back in the community, we need help. And they were talking to April and said, April, we need help in doing hair in Cambodia. There's a lot of bad things happening over there, and one of the things they can do is teach these girls the skill of cosmetology. April came to me and said, Carol keeps talking to me about getting involved, and I said, no. We only do things local, because there's enough in our own community. Let's focus in on our own community. And April finally pulled the client card, and she said, she is a client. You should at least go have coffee with her. So I went, I had coffee. Now I tell people coffee's dangerous, because within 2 hours, I went from no, we only do local, to I can't turn my back on this. And what I found out is that I didn't know a lot about sex trafficking. I'd heard about sex trafficking, but it's not real. It happens in other parts of the world, and I just didn't understand how deep it was. So some of the things that I found out from her during this process was that there are about 12.3 million people that are being trafficked right now in the world. Now, by traffic, that's modern-day slavery. So what I found out is there's a lot of modern-day slavery going on right now. But what was surprising to me is that over 80% of those that are being trafficked are women, and 60% of them are children. Children under the age of 18 that were being trafficked. And they're being trafficked in all different ways, but sex trafficking is one of the biggest ones. The part that got me, that really hooked me when I started to hear these statistics, was in Cambodia specifically, that the children are as young as 6 years old that are put in these brothels. And when I started to hear what happens to these kids when they're either stolen, or some of them, the parents are duped into getting them into school and they end up in the brothels, and some of them are outright sold by aunts or somebody in their family that says, hey, we can't afford these. The average Cambodian makes 80 cents or less a day. So you can see the poverty runs. So I started to hear these statistics, and I started to think about my own granddaughter, who at the age of 11 had already lived way more life than some of these girls had ever even imagined. So that caught me. The other thing was over 1/3 of the girls in the sex trafficking industry right now are under the age of 18 in Cambodia. So I started to hear about her story and how they've been going over there. They built schools and they're working with transition and rescue organizations. But once these girls are rescued, they didn't have any place to go. They don't have the skills other than sewing and domestic. So, but when I found out that right here in the United States, we have over 100,000 trafficked teens, and that Seattle was number 3 in the nation. And the thing that it was disturbing for me is that nothing's being done in the United States really to support these young women as they're pulled out of the trafficking. Because typically what happens is prostitutes are treated as criminals. So these girls are prosecuted as criminals at the age of 14, 15, 16 years old, or they try and put them in the juvenile system. Seattle actually has a couple programs now where they're working with these teens to create avenues for them to get out of this. We're a model city, actually, in the nation to get these girls out of the trafficking problem. And part of that is by giving them a transitional home, a safe place to go, get their education, and find safety, find a new direction in life. Safety from the pimps. They're actually going after and prosecuting the pimps and the Johns now. And some of you have probably seen some of that. So all of this started, when I heard this, I was like, okay, I can't sit back and just watch this happen. So I started doing a little bit of digging, and I shared with my team, here's what I heard. And a couple of my employees said, we're in. If you're going to do something with this, I want to be part of it. I want to make a difference in this. So I got a little information on Cambodia. See, here's the thing. I think it's important that I do this because if you're like me, I had no idea where Cambodia was. I knew it was somewhere in the east, but it was like, I didn't know my geography. So I had to look it up and see where is Cambodia exactly. And in the process of looking it up, what I did was I started doing some research on my trip over there. And I found out some history that I think is really important because a lot of times we think of Cambodia and we think, let's look at Siem Reap, Angkor Wat, the big areas, the pretty parts of Cambodia, because that's really what we see a lot of. But as I started to dig into the information around this, what I found out was it has a really ugly side to it. And so a little bit of history. I like to do this really quick. In 1863, the French came in and colonized Cambodia. After that, in 1953, they established their own constitutional monarchy. So basically, they were just like Great Britain. They had a king, they have a prime minister, they had a government. Corrupt as it was functional at the time. And then I talk about the dark years. These are the years that have the biggest impact on Cambodia and why they are where they are today. Between 1970 and 79, many of you may recall, we had the Vietnam War going on. During the Vietnam War, Cambodia was trying to remain neutral and stay out of it. The United States was involved with the Vietnam War, and one of the things that we did during that time is dropped bombs all along the Cambodian Vietnam border. And we dropped so many bombs, we actually dropped more bombs, more payload on Cambodia than has ever been dropped on any country in the whole world, ever, including the atomic bombs we dropped on Japan. And when I found out this, because the reason why that's important is what it did is it totally messed up Cambodia and made it possible for Pol Pot to come into power. And for those of you who don't know, Pol Pot was the leader of the Khmer Rouge. And the Khmer Rouge systematically killed 2.5 million of their own people, their own Cambodian people. What he did was he went through and he said anybody that wore glasses, anybody that was a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher, any education at all, they were killed. Because what he wanted to do was start at ground zero. Take the country back to zero, this is us, we're starting over. And in fact, he called it year zero when he came into power. For about 5 years, he tortured the country. And at that point, the Vietnamese came in at the end of the Vietnam War. After the war was over, Vietnam came in and rescued Phnom Penh and Cambodia and reestablished a government without Pol Pot. Unfortunately, Pol Pot remained at large out in the jungles and wreaked havoc on the country. So we, from 79 to 93, we have the Vietnamese in there. We have a very messy situation. The United Nations is trying to help out. It's only gotten worse. There's a few things that they did, but they're powerless. The United Nations had really very little power, and the corruption grew. But they finally, in 1993, reestablished their constitutional monarchy. They have a prime minister who's been involved with the politics since, the 70s, early 70s, actually before Vietnam. And so the corruption that happens in there is just a mess. Now, all of this to tell you that it's created this underbelly in the country for a lot of this sex trafficking to take place. There's a lot of, I love this picture of Cambodia. It's a picture when I was going down. This is actually in Phnom Penh. And I think that when you look at the wires up in there, this is so typical of Cambodia as a whole. It's very symbolic of the way everything is just a crazy tangled mess, and everybody does whatever they want to do. If you want electricity, you go string it yourself. If you want cable, you just go over and hook it up to somebody else's and run it over to your house. At one point, I saw a guy on a ladder in the middle of the street hanging his, and it's the busiest intersection in Phnom Penh, hanging his own wire. And I didn't have my camera ready. I wish that I would have snapped a picture of it. But I think it's just indicative of kind of the mess that is Cambodia. And a typical neighborhood in Cambodia looks something like this. This is in Phnom Penh. So I'm talking in the city, and you'll notice that there's a whole lot of garbage. And the problem is they don't pick up garbage in Cambodia because you have to pay for it. And nobody, at 80 cents a day, you don't have the money to pay for your garbage to be picked up. This is a typical house. You'll see a lot of homes in Cambodia with the tin sides or the tin roof. And sometimes if they're by water, up on the stilts because it rains a lot and floods. But this is a picture that I think really captures the dichotomy that's going on and the frustration that I saw over there. Because this is the Chinese, Japanese, some of the other countries are coming in and buying up this very precious land, and they think it's valuable. And the poor people that are living in this land have no proof that they own it, because Pol Pot destroyed all proof. So after they came back into Phnom Penh and got their homes back, now the current government is saying, you know what, you can't prove that that's yours, we want it. In fact, this was a lake, Oingkok Lake. So they came in and they said, you know, valuable property here, let's fill it in. We don't need a lake here. So this is all being filled in. And all of these homes around the side, they're tearing them down. And they're taking 3,000 to 5,000 people in a community and saying, here's the deal. We're moving you to this displacement camp 2 hours out of the city. So now they have no way of really making a living because they can't get back and forth. And what they've done is they've created this vulnerable population out in the communities. This was a building that was torn down and reclaimed by the government so they could build something. But right here, I'm at my friend Anna's house, and I'm looking out over the balcony of the stairwell. And this here is just the garbage that piles up. But this is what I thought was important. When you look at these blue tarps in this picture, those are homes. Those are homes of people that were unwilling to go 2 hours out of the city because their families all were around there. So that's where they're living. And the stench was so powerful, 3 floors up, I was amazed. Anna lives in a space that's probably smaller than this section where I'm standing now, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe back to the wall. 14 adults in there, 1 room and a little bathroom in one space. So these are the kind of the conditions that they're dealing with. And this is one of the villages that I went out to see. So I thought, I got to see what these villages look like. Well, these villages don't have running water. There's one little pump on the side. There's no toilets. They have a big hole in the middle of this field where they use for a bathroom. And they live in these grass thatched roofed huts that leak consistently. So, and there are 2 seasons in Cambodia, hot and wet. So you're either hot or you're wet and hot, which is very humid. So we went out, but here's the thing about this. Every person we met, amazing, sweet, nice, friendly. The kids, you know, were just the most generous, happy-go-lucky kids. It was absolutely an amazing experience for me. And I'm walking through the village, and they're going out and they're getting their cans of Cokes. and bringing me a can of Coke. I mean, they have nothing, and they're offering me something. And I was just struck by that. And as we were visiting with the village leaders, I was walking through, and one of the little boys reached up and grabbed my hand. And the first thought that I had when he did that was, where's my hand sanitizer? And I caught myself, and I looked down in his eyes, and I saw these big brown eyes looking, and he was just so happy. And I thought, to hell with hand sanitizer, because at this point, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter. At that point, I knew I could never be the same at that point. And I walked away from there, and I thought, okay, we have to do something about this, because it's not okay, because that's what makes this population vulnerable. They get vulnerable when they're put out there. They're desperate for food. They're desperate for anything. And then their kids, somebody comes along and says, I will help you. Give me your daughter. I'm going to take her to the factory and we'll send money home. She'll make clothes. She'll have a nice living. And the next thing you know, she's caught up in a brothel. So we went back and we said, okay, let's look at the salon industry and let's think, what could we do as a community? The beauty industry is an amazing industry, and they love fashion in Cambodia. The problem is they don't have a lot of it. This is a typical Cambodian salon. This was taken from the roadside. I'm standing on the road, so they're all open front. You can see that sanitation isn't big. It's a little chaotic. And the way hair is taught over there is that a salon owner will take on apprentices who pay her to learn. The problem is no salon owner will teach them more than 70% of what they know. Why? That's right. If they teach 100%, they'll go down the road, they'll become better, and they'll take their clients. So you can imagine then, generation after generation, they're only teaching 70% of what they know. And so what we saw there is that we need to raise the level of education, not only with the hair that they're doing, but also with the sanitation and some of the other things around hair. This is a typical barber shop. It almost looks a little like a drive-through barber shop. You know, you got your little moped right there in the window. And you can see this towel right here. I'm sure that's a clean, sanitized towel in Cambodia. So you can see that, you know, but men do the barbering, women do the styling. And there's a real separation in Cambodia. Oh yeah, this picture, by the way, is a picture of their distributors. So that's salon services in Cambodia. They're basically big old warehouses with jobber booths, and I love how the mannequin heads are all hanging in plastic bags. It's got a nice little eerie feeling. So we went back and said, okay, what could we do? And the first year we were there in 2009. We met with every non-governmental organization or NGO, which is their nonprofits, everyone we could. And we went and we looked and we told them our story, and we want to help, and we're gonna teach these girls so they can go out in the villages and do hair. And finally, this one woman who's been over there for years, very smart, direct woman, said, you know what, this is a nice idea, but take your toys and go home. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable, so just don't bother. And when we walked out, and my co-founder, Lauren, was just like, oh my gosh, that was horrible, that was awful. And I said, no, that was the best meeting we've had. Because she was honest with us, and she said it's not going to work. So we came back and we said, we need to create a sustainable model. That was in 2009. So we came back and we said, what do we do with this? What we want to do with this is we want to create a high-end hair salon. So the hair salon that we want to create, it's got to have a look and feel similar to what we're in right now. That it's going to attract the wealthier Cambodians, because there are about 10 to 15% of the Cambodians that have all the money. But they want to spend that money because they like people to know that they have that money. They drive Lexuses, SUVs, by the way, that say Lexus on the side, in case you didn't know that was a Lexus. I mean, they want to make sure that everybody is aware of their wealth. So we want to do something that is sustainable, wherein the salon itself could generate enough revenue that it will help offset the cost of the school. So the school is not always dependent upon donor dollars. So if we can staff this with Western stylists, either those volunteering or those that choose to move there for more than 4 months and get a small stipend so they can live on, but the salon itself would generate enough, because the average Cambodian pays $1 for a haircut, maybe $3 now, so $1 to $3. We're talking about a $40 haircut. We want to do a $40, $45 haircut. so that it is, something that they, and they're fascinated with Western culture, so this makes sense. The other thing that we've done is we've partnered with rescue operations already over there. We're not doing rescuing, and that's the part I try and make sure everybody knows, that we're not going over there to rescue. So there's not, by the time the girls get into our program, they will have been out maybe 3 years, and they will have gone through some education, some psychological counseling, things to help them move back into our program. So they will be ready to come into our program. And by then, long enough out of the brothels that there's not a threat that they're going to come back looking for these girls. So we'll partner with rescue operations. We're also working with orphanages. I've met with somebody who does a lot of work with the Cambodian government on doing orphanages, and so ways, because these kids are institutionalized as well, no way to move out into the community. So we want to find a way to help them get back reintegrated into the community and within the beauty industry. So the idea is that we will create jobs so the girls could then get skills that they can either use in our salon and make a much higher living, or they can go work in other higher-end salons because they're starting to pop up in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh. So we could get them ready to go work in those salons. But ideally what we would love is for these young ladies to become salon stylists, but then eventually become educators. So they too can educate the girls coming into the salon. And on the domestic side, what we want to do here in the United States is create that same avenue. As I was talking about the rescue operations that are happening here in our own country, having a vehicle for those girls to be able to get out of it. And so one of the things that we're targeting doing is partnering with cosmetology schools, creating scholarships so where they pay half the scholarship and the foundation will pay the other half. So these girls have that opportunity to learn skills as cosmetologists as well. So that was our plan, one of the things that we wanted to do. Now, one of the things we did was we went through Cambodia and said, let's take a look and see what's out there. There's like one high-end, maybe two, Christine's and Solchit's, where there were 2 high-end schools. And we were able to go through one of them. And you can see here, I mean, it's really nice, but the problem is only the wealthiest of wealthy can go. Now they had like 200 students in there. So there are all these, which tells me 2 things. There are wealthy people with some money, and this is important enough that they're going to go to this school and learn. The interesting thing is they don't have a lot of tools to learn. They don't understand. I asked a group of girls I was talking to, I said, do you guys know Vidal Sassoon, who Vidal Sassoon is? And they're like, no, Vidal Sassoon. And so I go out into the hall, look up, and their advertisement of their haircuts were all Sassoon cuts. I was like, well, that's Vidal Sassoon right out there. So they, it's like they don't understand the history behind it. They also don't have good hair color in Cambodia. You either have black or orange most of the time, because most of the color is knockoff color that they're buying at those bazaars that I showed you earlier. So getting good color education and good cuts and making sure that that's in there is part of the challenge. So one of the things that I'm patterning this after is I went there and met with one of the NGOs who's created a place called Bloom Cafe. And Bloom Cafe is doing $40 and $50 cakes, decorated cakes, and their biggest clients are all Cambodian. So they are paying, and their space looks like this. And the thing that I love about it is very rich, very wealthy looking. It's got a French colonial look to it, and they're attracting the market that we want to attract. She's got 35 young ladies working that are doing everything from serving guests in the coffee shop, bakery that they've created, to baking the cakes, to decorating cakes like you wouldn't believe. And if you want to check it out, go out to Bloom Cafe on Facebook and look at some of their amazing pictures that they post. It's incredible. So that's one of the things that I know is a demonstrated evidence that this would work, this model would work if done right. So I took I went on the second trip over there in 2011, as we were going around and meeting with more of the NGOs, formulating our plan. Halfway through that trip, I realized if this was going to work, one of us had to be on the ground. I looked at my co-founder, and she had just had a baby, and knew that, you know, she's got a family, a young family, and I said, you know, I think I need to move here. And she said, what did you say? And I said, I don't know. Don't say nothing. I didn't say anything. Do not repeat that. Don't tell anybody. But I realized at that moment that if it was going to be successful, we had to do something. So I said, let me sit on this for a while. I'm going to come back next year, and I'm going to spend 6 weeks over here to see if I could really create community and make this a reality. So went back last year for 6 weeks. I took my cousin Brian came for 4 of those weeks. She's a makeup artist for Mac. We met with one of the rescue operations, and we said, Mac donated this makeup. Can we give it to you? And they said, no. How about if you bring it out and show some of the girls how to put it on? So we thought, what an opportunity. We went out. They have an amazing operation, great space. The girls were so, you could just see the sense. There are 2 different kinds of girls that I've met in the rescue operations. There's the girls that have shied away from men out of fear. So when I come around, they would retreat. And then there were the girls that preened, that tried to make themselves look pretty for me. Both broke my heart. And some of the operations where we've seen, I could see they didn't have the psychological trauma support. They hadn't worked through it. We got to Transitions Global, and these young ladies, you could just see their confidence level was back. They were laughing and smiling, and one of them came right up and introduced herself. Within 2 hours of working with Brian, they were laughing, putting makeup on each other, and then they were putting her makeup on at the end. When we got done, we went to lunch afterwards, and Brian and I were sitting there, and the tears were just rolling down her face. And that was her moment. Everybody has a moment. That was her moment where she knew her life wouldn't be the same after spending the time with these, because they're precious. They're precious young girls. I mean, girls, 13 and 14 years old. And to watch them coming back to life, it's like, so she at that moment said, I can't go back to life as normal. So she's actually moving over in January to join me. So I will be moving over to Cambodia actually 5 days from now. So I'm in the home stretch right now. So on the 22nd, I will be leaving at 2 a.m. to move to Cambodia for 3 years. And my goal is to scout out, find a location, set up our NGO status, and get people to come over and help change the lives of these young ladies. That's the goal. That's what we want to do. Brian's coming over to work with me. I have an esthetician who's already over there teaching English. She went a year ahead of me, so she can be prepared. So she wants to be part of this operation as well. So what we're doing is I'm going around. I've been to more salons in the last 3 months than I have ever been in, and I'm just telling the story because I think that the beauty industry, this thing could grow. One salon at a time and one person at a time. I want this to be kind of a grassroots effort to make a difference in the world. So what we're asking for is people to help educate. One of the things we need is stylists. We will, within a year from now, September 2014 is when we're hoping to open up the school. And what we're hoping for is stylists that will come over and volunteer for anywhere from a month to 3 months of their time. If somebody wants to come for 4 months or longer, we'll pay them enough to live there. Just, basic wage to live there. We need a lead educator, just like I have a lead esthetician, a lead educator, somebody that comes over and leads up the training program for at least a year. It'll take a year, and if somebody decides they want to stay on longer, that's great. But we also need to educate our clients and spread the word about what we're doing and what's going on. I think the world doesn't know, and I know it's an ugly thing, and sometimes it's just not fun to look at. But I think when we start to look at it, what we can do is create the hope that goes with it. And that's what I want, is for us to create hope in these young girls' lives. The other thing that we need is donations. Obviously, it's a startup foundation. We're going to be building a school and salon over there, so we're going to need funds to do it. It is cheaper than opening a salon over here, but there's still a lot of costs involved. So we're looking for people that will donate time or donate money to help us get to where we need to go. The first year, we're targeting $100,000 to get us to that place where we can feel comfortable building. And then we've got a budget for each year. So ultimately, we'd like to be making $250,000 a year. And so we're doing grant writing. We're doing all of the other fundraising avenues. But I have found that the salons are the best avenue. Lisa Power Salon over on Queen Anne took a Saturday, dedicated all their services to everything that they did was going to go to the foundation. They raised over $3,000 on one Saturday. So, so any kind of fundraising, because the third thing we're looking for is advocates. And that is somebody to take the lead in your city or your community to say, you know what, I can't go to Cambodia, or I don't want to go to Cambodia. Because here's the thing, half of my team wants to go at some point. The other half is like, no way. It's too hot, too many bugs, or whatever. I can't go that far away. And I get that. A lot of people have no desire to go and do that. And I think we can still get involved on a local level, either helping to raise awareness, raise money, coordinate events within your community. One of the things that we're hoping to do is next year sometime create a competition, so to speak, of maybe a dozen salons as a fundraiser. And we'll put together a theme like, let's say justice is the theme, and then each salon gets to create their vision of justice with hair, makeup, and dress. And then we'll have a panel of judges, and we'll do a little runway show, and they'll be judged on different aspects of the look, but also how many guests they invite, how much money they raise as a team, those kind of things. So we'll build that in there. So that's one of the ways we're going to do it. So everybody, we've got ideas, and we've got volunteers that are helping now create more ways that we can raise money. So that's what we want, and I'd love to have an advocate in every city in the state, in the country. I'd love Madison, Wisconsin to have an advocate. I'd love to go down to Tallahassee, Florida, have an advocate there, so that everywhere there's communities working on what we're doing here. So my goal is to create moments for other people so that everybody has an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of our girls in our community and the girls in Cambodia and ultimately around the world. This model is being designed, by my judgment, so that it can be redeveloped in other countries. That once we get this going in Cambodia, we can go to Laos and do it there, and Vietnam and do it there. And then we can go over to Africa and some of the countries in Africa where there's a huge problem. I just met a woman from Guyana, and she was sharing all of the challenges that they have. And the sex trafficking is a huge problem over there. So that's another possibility. So finding out what communities we can go in and take this message and the same model out to the rest of the world.